Hello, friends. On 24th of December 1999, Indian Airlines flight IC-814 took off from Kathmandu. This flight was headed to Delhi. It usually takes 2 hours to fly from Kathmandu to Delhi, but the passengers and crew members on this flight were unaware that for them, reaching Delhi would take a much longer time. 5 people hijacked this plane. These hijackers asked for $200 million from the Indian government to free the passengers. They had some additional demands as well, such as releasing some terrorists from jail. The entire country held their breath for the next 7 days and watched this unfold on their television screens. This hijacking was the biggest hijacking in Indian history, and the last plane hijacking. Yup, that's right, friends. Fortunately, since then, no other plane has been hijacked in India. Come, let's understand this entire incident in detail. December 24, 1999. An Indian airplane flying from Kathmandu to Delhi was hijacked today. The plane was carrying 11 crew members and 179 passengers. We were blindfolded, all of us, with our heads down. Their safety was our first priority. We have evidence to show that hijackers were encouraged by Pakistan. A little after this flight took off from Kathmandu, the passengers of this flight were served food, and while they were having lunch, suddenly, 4 masked men stood up and started taking away the food. They announced that the plane had been hijacked. The hijackers went into the pilot's cabin, and with Captain Devi Sharan at gunpoint, he was instructed to keep flying westwards. Actually, the hijackers wanted to take this plane to Pakistan, so this plane kept flying beyond Delhi towards Pakistan, specifically, to Lahore's airport. But the Pakistani air traffic controllers in Lahore strictly forbade the flight from landing in their territory. On the other hand, the Indian air traffic controllers came to know about this hijacking at 4:40 p.m. And interestingly, our incumbent Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and his Principal Secretary Brajesh Mishra came to know about this 1 hour later, at 5:20 p.m. At 6:04 p.m., the Indian Air Traffic Control tried to establish communication with flight IC-814. Captain Devi Sharan tells them that the plane was running low on fuel, and they weren't permitted to land in Lahore. The captain requests the Indian Air Traffic Control to ask their Pakistani counterpart to grant them permission to land in Lahore, because the hijackers were getting frustrated. The hijackers were threatening to kill the passengers if they weren't allowed to land in Pakistan. At 6:30 in the evening, the Indian High Commission in Pakistan requests Pakistani authorities to allow the plane to land in Lahore, but they weren't granted permission. Meanwhile, Captain Devi Sharan tried to talk to the hijackers to tell them that the plane was running low on fuel and that they couldn't keep waiting for permission. They had to land somewhere and refuel. He proved successful in convincing the hijackers, and the hijackers agree to have the plane land in Amritsar for refueling. At 6:44 p.m., the flight starts descending towards Amritsar. Friends, the hijackers did not want this to happen. They had hijacked an Indian plane, and to have it land in India would give a huge upper hand to the Indian government and authorities. In this crisis, this situation was very advantageous for India. The Indian forces could now get better control over the situation, because the plane was about to land in India. But what happened next turned out to be a historic blunder. Subramanian Swamy describes this incident. What did the Indian authorities do wrong? There was not one, but several mistakes. At 7:01 p.m., the flight landed at Amritsar airport. Immediately, they request that the flight be refueled. Amazingly, Punjab's Director General of Police, Sarbjit Singh, was informed about this hijacking 1 hour earlier around 6 p.m., and not through other official sources, but through the TV news. Can you imagine the scale of the communication failure here? Such an important officer got to know about this hijacking while watching TV. After this hijacking, a crisis management group was formed, and a local committee with the purpose of delaying the plane as much as possible. This would allow more time for the commandos to develop a strategy, and to conduct some operations on the ground. But the hijackers in the plane refused to communicate with the local police officials. They wanted to communicate with the officials in Delhi, but this communication couldn't be effective. Captain Devi Sharan requested again to have the plane refueled. If it wasn't refueled, the hijackers were threatening to attack the passengers. They would start killing the passengers. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. No refueling was initiated. Hijackers actually attacked a person, Satnam Singh. They used a knife to injure his neck. Once again, Captain Devi Sharan requested to refuel the plane immediately. 40 minutes passed like this. By 7:45 p.m., the crisis management group formulates a plan and gave orders to the Punjab police. They decided to take advantage of the fuel tanker fueling the plane to hide some officers of the Punjab police so that they could go and puncture the tires of the plane. With damaged tires, the plane would not be able to take off again. It was a good plan. But before this plan could be brought into action, the ATC came up with another plan. Why not place a fuel tanker in front of the plane to block its way? So a fuel tanker started moving towards the plane. But the driver of the fuel tanker was driving it a bit too fast. So the ATC was worried that the speed of the tanker may tip off the hijackers that they were planning on doing something. So the driver was asked to drive slowly. And the driver, due to miscommunication or something else, suddenly stopped the fuel tanker. The hijackers and the captain in the cockpit of the plane saw this happening. The hijackers were shocked to see this. First, the tanker was moving towards them so fast, and then it stopped suddenly. They figured out something was wrong. This frustrated the hijackers. They gave up on refueling and wanted to take the plane back into the air. Without refueling, Captain Sharon was pressurized into having the plane take off by ignoring the fuel tanker, even if it meant hitting it. They wanted the plane to be airborne. Under pressure, Captain Sharon prepared to have the plane take off. While speeding on the runway, he barely avoided hitting the fuel tanker in front of them. There was an accident almost, but it didn't happen, and once again the plane was in the air. This happened exactly at 7:49 p.m. The moment when the NSG commandos reached the airport. The operation backfired terribly. The NSG commandos didn't get the chance to take any action. And most importantly, the plane was still not refueled. While taking off, Captain Devi Sharon sent a message to the ATC. "We are all dying." And quote. Lahore is just 50 kilometers from Amritsar. Once again, this flight turned towards Pakistan. Once again, the ATC and Pakistan denied permission to land this plane in Lahore. They were worried that the hijackers would force the pilots to land the plane in Lahore. So all lights were turned off at Pakistan's airport. All the navigational aids and lights in the airport were turned off, so that even if they wanted to land the plane, it would be exceedingly difficult without lights. But Captain Sharon was under so much pressure from the hijackers. He couldn't care whether the runway was visible or not. He had to land the plane, no matter where it was. The place descended slowly, and suddenly, Captain Sharon realized that they were about to crash land on a highway. Seeing this, he made a final request to Pakistan's ATC, that they will crash land on the highway, if they weren't allowed to land at the airport. Hearing this, finally, the ATC at Lahore agreed, and this plane landed in Lahore at 8:07 p.m. India tells Pakistan's airport officials to prevent this plane from taking off again. India planned to send the Indian High Commissioner in Islamabad, G. Pardasarathy, to negotiate with the hijackers. At this airport in Pakistan, this plane was finally refueled, and to prevent this plane from taking off once again, lights were turned off once again, and their commandos surrounded the plane. Apparently, the Pakistani forces tried to negotiate with the hijackers. They asked them to release the children and female passengers, but these negotiations failed. Hijackers were frustrated that their negotiations couldn't reach a solution. Their demands weren't fulfilled. Another passenger was attacked. Rupin Katil, a 25-year-old man from Gurgaon, returning with his wife from their honeymoon. Rupin passed away later. One passenger, Rupin Katil, returning from his honeymoon, was brutally stabbed to death. And quote. Pakistan was tasked with providing a helicopter to the Indian High Commissioner, so that he could reach Lahore for the negotiations as quickly as possible. But the helicopter was provided 3 hours late. By the time he reached Lahore, he found that the plane had taken off once again. How was this possible when all the lights at the airport were switched off, and the plane was surrounded by the commandos? How could the plane still take off? We do not have much information about this, but we get some clues later on in the story. The flight was directed from Lahore to Oman, but even there their permission to land was rejected. The next landing of this flight was at Dubai's Al. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe for the next part.